My brother is here. He works in America, Harshal Pujari. So he works in Detroit. He's just visiting Bangalore, exploring possibility of diversifying his company here. So we had a meeting today morning. That's why I got delayed. I would like to welcome Harshal also here. Thank you for coming. So the typical, when I was in Detroit, we look very dissimilar. So we had come to the Detroit temple and there were several people. So there's one American devotee there and there's some Indian, our congregation devotees. So one devotee asked me, is he a real brother? So and after that an American was asking, do you Indians have imaginary brothers also? So the real brother is the typical Indian English usage. So we use the word brother for cousins and others also. So he said, for them, what is the opposite of real is imaginary? Do you have imaginary brothers? Like we also have this, what is your good name? For Americans, you mean I have bad name also? So it is actually in Bengal they have a Bhalanam and Dakanam. So Bhalanam is like your good name, Dakanam is like pet name. Whenever you are mischievous, your parents call you by that name. So that we translate that into English. It doesn't work so well, at least to American ear. So here we are going to discuss from one of the oft quoted sections in the Bhagavad-gita. This is 254 to 262. Actually not 262, 272. Now this is the last part of the first chapter. What is this? The Gita has how many chapters? 18 chapters. Good. How many verses? 700 verses. Which is the longest chapter?
Second. 18th.
Okay. 18th and 2nd are in good competition. So 18th has how many verses? 78. Second? 72. So only these two chapters are the 70 scorers in the Bhagavad-gita, about 70. Now, in one sense, the first chapter is like a summary of the Gita, and the last chapter is also a summary of the Gita. It's in different senses. In the first sense, you could say it's an introductory summary. And the last chapter is like a concluding summary. When Krishna and Arjuna start speaking, it is not that Krishna plans to speak 18 chapters. It is not that when Krishna is speaking, Krishna says, Ataha dvitiyo adhyayah, ataha panchadasho adhyayah. It's an organic conversation. And eventually that conversation is put into So it's an organic conversation that is put into chapter-wise form by Vyasadeva when he composed the Mahabharata. And in the Mahabharata there are no chapter titles. There's too many chapters to title actually. So like even sometimes if you see novels, they just have chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. They don't have titles for novels, chapters. So like that, the Mahabharata chapters don't have titles. Now some renditions of the Mahabharata, they may have titles, but generally they don't. So the Gita originally does not have chapter titles. And the specific chapter titles are given by different commentators. And those are what may cause some variation. Now, emphasizing the importance of the Gita, Srila Prabhupada chooses the chapter title Contents of the Gita Summarized. Quite often, another title for chapter 2 is Sankhya Yoga. So now, this last section is especially significant. There are many places where Krishna is describing the characteristics of spiritually evolved souls, of self-realized souls, of the kind of person who will be spiritually connected, spiritually empowered. This is the first time Krishna does that. Why is this noise coming in here? or rather, Hare Krishna. Now it's not. So, in this particular section, when Krishna describes, okay, whenever I move it comes, is it? No. Okay. I don't know when it is coming. Anyway, somehow it is coming. Sorry? Okay. So, in this particular section, is the first time Krishna is going to describe the explanation in terms of the characteristics. And this is in response to a specific question by Arjuna. Arjuna is asking, what are the characteristics of a Sthita Prajna? Now this has, as we can see, 19 verses. We won't be able to go through each verse one by one, but we'll be focusing on the section. So let's recite the verse. Arjuna vacha Sthita Prajnasya ka bhasha Samadhistasya keshava Sthitadhi kim prabhasheta Kimasita vrajeta kim. So Sthita Prajnasya ka bhasha. Now this is a clear example of non-literal usage. In common, our language, there is a lot of metaphorical usage. Say for example, recently there is a Tirupati Laddu controversy. So I made a video about it. And there I use, for whoever is responsible for mixing serious contaminants in the laddus, heads need to roll. So one comment came to me, do you mean that people should be killed for this? No, heads need to roll. That's a non-literal usage, Not literally head has to be cut and it rolls away. That's how it originally started. But heads need to roll. It means that there has to be punishment. There has to be a penalization of those who are responsible. So in our day-to-day language, there is a lot of metaphorical usage that we do. And it's understood from context that it is metaphorical. That what is being literally said and what is actually being intended are two different things. So, Sthita Prajnasya ka bhasha. The word bhasha can literally mean language. So, what is the language of the enlightened souls? Does it mean that there is some special language we all have to learn? And only when we learn that language, then we become enlightened? In the Buddhist tradition, even in Tantra tradition, there is the idea that there is a secret language in which the mystics communicate, and unless you earn their trust, they won't teach that secret language to us. So is Krishna referring to anything like that over here? Not at all. He's in the middle of the battlefield that he's speaking, so it's a publicly available knowledge. So ka bhasha does not refer to literally the language. So, in general, the word bhasha comes from the word that bhashyate, that which describes. So, the tool that which we use to describe is language. But here, it refers to descriptive symptoms, ka bhasha. Sthita Prajnasya ka bhasha. What are the characteristics of a self-realized person? And then, kim prabhasheta. So, first he asks symptoms or characteristics, and then he's asking three specific characteristics. How do they speak? Kim prabhasheta. Now again, how do they speak? What does it mean? Is it that all self-realized souls are supposed to speak softly, loudly, firmly, gently? Now, how does they speak? The implication, if you look at the context, just what comes before and what comes afterwards, is that how do they respond to life's ups and downs? That some people complain a lot whenever things go wrong. Wherever they come in, some people bring like a breath of fresh air into a room when they come. And there are other people who take all the air out of the room when they come. So there are different kinds of people. Some people are so gloomy that they spread gloom everywhere. So how do they respond to life's ups and downs? And kim asita prajeta kim. This is the most stark difference between the literal and non-literal. How do they sit and how do they walk? So, we are talking about self-realized souls here. We are not like talking about fashion ramp walking models. What is the point of saying how do they walk? How do they sit? Krishna talking about yogis have to, all enlightened souls have to sit in a particular asana. And when somebody is sitting like this, oh, this person enlightened. This person not sitting like this, not enlightened. No, it's not like that. Asit and Prajet again has non-literal meanings. Sitting is used to symbolize the restraint of the senses. And so when we are sitting, our working senses are restrained. And Asit is symbolizing the working of the senses. When we walk, so Kim Asit Prajet Kim. How do they sit and how do they walk? So there are 4 questions over here. Bhasha. Bhasha refers to their characteristics. Then there is Prabhasheta. How do they speak? That is, they speech specifically, okay. Their responses. It's coming and going. So how do they respond to life's ups and downs? Then there is Asit. What does Asit refer to? Their sense regulation. So when there is temptation, how are they able to restrain their senses? Brajet. That refers to their sense engagement. How do they move about in the world? How do they function in this world? So we will focus on some of the verses. I'll give an overview of the section before and after what is going on. One of the key symptoms, what Krishna describes in the next verse is that if somebody is self-realized, somebody is spiritually evolved, their characteristic is that they are looking for inner happiness. That's what they focus on, not outer happiness. Inner happiness, not outer happiness. So, there's one diagram that I'll come back to again and again in this whole session. That if somebody is a materialist, on contrast with that, somebody is a spiritualist. Now I'm talking about a materialist, that person will not be an atheist. But for most people, the world is big and God is small. So maybe God exists, but how does God matter? When I started sharing Bhakti, I started contacting my various relatives and talking with them and telling them about my spiritual journey and exploration. So one of my relatives told me, yeah, I believe in God. He's happy there, I'm happy here. So the idea is that God seems to be irrelevant. But as we grow spiritually, what happens is the world becomes small and God becomes big. So the result of this, the world becomes small and God becomes big. The world is always filled with ups and downs. And when the world is big for us, then the ups and downs of life also become very big. That means whenever something good happens, we become elated. When something bad happens, we become dejected. And this is what makes people go emotionally extreme. They become emotionally unstable and unreliable. When the world is very big, anything good happens. If somebody is into football, their team wins, they are on top of the world. If their team loses, the world is on top of them. They are buried underground. They feel like that. So what happens is that the externals affect us too much. And this can make us unstable. Now by contrast, if the world itself becomes small, then even its dualities become small. So that's how at this stage there are 2 things that happen. Material steadiness comes in. Now somebody may say, if I become materially steady, but these ups are what make me happy. Isn't it? If I become steady, okay, but then how will I be happy? What is the source of my happiness? Now the problem is that in the material world, things always come in dualities. The extent to which we get happiness from some material thing, eventually that very thing will give us distress. But because that is the only thing we know as a source of happiness, so we take the positive side and we hope the negative side will not come. Or we hope that we can push off the negative side as long as possible. If our favorite team wins, that's great, but sometime or the other our favorite team is also going to lose. So the problem is that material happiness brings distress as a part of the bargain. But if that is the only happiness we know, we accept the bargain. Because there is no other bargain available for us. So the key point is, this steadiness, it can't be sustained if the material dimension is the only dimension in our life. If somebody is watching a movie for enjoyment and they stay okay, don't become happy when the hero is winning and don't become sad when the hero is losing. What is the point of watching the movie then? I want to experience emotions over there. So unless somebody has some other source of enjoyment apart from the movie, they will want to get involved in the emotions of the movie. That's the very reason they are watching the movie. So when this material steadiness is sought by itself, it just makes our life very dry and emotionless. And that's why there's a second part to it. That Krishna or God doesn't just become bigger for us. Our connection with Him also becomes strong. Is this color visible? Okay, a little bit. Yes, no, I use another color. So when this connection becomes stronger, there is spiritual happiness or spiritual joyfulness. So we are materially peaceful and spiritually joyful. If we are not spiritually joyful, we can't be materially peaceful. Because the peacefulness is itself pointless. It just won't last. So that's why we need to focus on what we are trying to do in our lives. That we don't just want to be materially steady, we want to become spiritually connected. And these are 2 points that are talked about in this particular verse. That this is the answer that Krishna used to Arjuna. That let's look at the verse. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Prajahati Yada Kaman Sarvan Partha Manogatan Atmanyevatmana Tushtaha Sthita Prajna So, Prajahati Yada Kaman. Kaman is desires. Prajahati means to give up. Sarvan Partha Manogatan. All the desires that arise from the mind for material pleasure, kaman, one gives up. And one gives those up. Then what happens? Atmanya eva atmana. With the mind turned inwards, in the self, in our spiritual side, tushtaha. One finds happiness. So that is materially, one is not looking for happiness. One becomes steady. But spiritually, one is finding happiness. So these two, that material detachment, material non-investment of emotion, and spiritual happiness, these two are the characteristics. Now it's very interesting over here. What first thing Krishna says, he's talking about, see these series of verses, they are both descriptive and prescriptive. Descriptive means this is how the seers are. Those who are spiritually evolved, they are like this. And prescriptive means to the extent seekers can behave like this, they can also grow. So it's a description of those people, it's a prescription for us, how we can become like this. So here what Krishna is telling is, what he's telling us to give up is not so much material objects. He is not saying prajahati yada vishayan. He is saying prajahati yada kaman. It is material desires. And here there is a significant difference, say, between renunciation and frustration. When I was in Pune, one time one boy came to me and he was saying, I want to become a brahmachari. What is the process? I said, okay. I had not seen him very often come to the temple also. And I said, okay, why do you want to become a brahmachari? He said, on Sunday I'll be deciding. On Sunday I'll be deciding whether I'll become a brahmachari or not. I said, what is going to happen on Sunday? He said, I have proposed to a girl. If she says no, I'll become a brahmachari. So I told him, frustration is no qualification for renunciation. Actually, the difference between frustration and renunciation is like the difference between fasting and starving. So, what is the difference between fasting and starving?
Fasting is voluntary.
It's voluntary. Starving is forced. So, like there are two things. There are material desires, or rather you can say desires for material objects, desires for sense objects, and there is availability of sense objects. So, if you consider this to be a table, so when there is frustration, is there, which of these two, availability of objects, is it there? Look at this. There are, if you consider in renunciation, is there material desires? No. Availability? It may be there, even if it is there. In frustration, what happens? Material desires?
Yes.
They are there. Availability is not there. So it's a categorical difference. So what Krishna is talking about is not that just because something is unavailable, okay, I don't have it, so I turn to something else. Okay, that may be initial starter, but that does not qualify one for renunciation. It takes time and effort. So Krishna is talking here about a person who is finding inner happiness and has given up not just outer sense objects, but even the desire for chasing outer objects. So it is, sometimes people are very eager to renounce their responsibilities, their obligations, and okay, that could well be escapism. What is important is to renounce the desires. And at least a sincere attempt to renounce the desire has to be there. And then one may renounce the world. Sarva Sankalpa Sannyasi, in the 6th chapter Krishna says, not Sarva Karma Sannyasi, but Sarva Sankalpa. Sankalpa is also desires. Prajahati yada kaman. So it is when we desire something, then that object becomes big in our mind. So when I said earlier here, the world is big or God is big, actually God is far bigger than the world, and that is how He always is. But I was talking in terms of our experience, our perception. So for somebody who is an avid cricket fan, then cricket becomes a very big thing. I was in Canada. I met some people. I was going to talk with them, and a boy came to me. He seemed like an Indian boy. Then I talked with him. He was, I don't know, Sri Lankan. So he told me he was an avid cricket fan. And then between 2011 to 2015, 2016, Sri Lanka came to several World Cup finals and lost all of them. So he said we were all, 4 of us were very avid cricket fans. After the 3rd time it happened, 2 of my friends committed suicide. And a 3rd one attempted but didn't happen. That's when I became shaken. I love cricket. Why can't one ends my life for that? So I started exploring something else. That's when I discovered the Bhagavad-gita. And then he came to Canada, he met devotees over there. So now, it's after all a game. It's important. We may have some pleasure in it. But if it becomes so big, oh, my favorite team lost, what is the point of living? It's just become disproportionately big. Somebody is an alcoholic, just like a devotee sees Krishna everywhere, they see alcohol everywhere. They may be in the office talking with their boss, and suddenly their boss's body changes into a bottle of alcohol. So now, something when we desire it and desire it strongly, that object becomes bigger and bigger in our consciousness. So when I say that the world is bigger or Krishna is bigger, that is a reflection of our desire. If our desire for the world is big, then the world will be big in our consciousness. If our desire for Krishna is big, then Krishna will be big in our consciousness. So, Prajahati yada kama, when the desires are given up, that's when the world becomes small. And so this is the defining characteristic Krishna says. After this, he goes on to answer the next three questions. So basically in his answer, the 55th is the answer to the first question, 56, 57 is the answer to the second question, 58 to 60, it depends on different commentators analyze it differently, 58 to 63, 58 to, you can go to 63. I'll focus on this way of analyzing. I'll explain another way of analyzing also later. The answer is the third question. Third question is, how do they restrain their senses? Second question is about speech. And 64 to 71 is the answer to the fourth question. And then 72 describes the destination. If somebody is self-realized, somebody lives in that state of being self-realized, what will they attain thereafter? Okay. So, we are right now, we've discussed the answer to the first question. We'll move to the second question. So, today we'll discuss these two. Today evening, I'll be discussing the third question. And tomorrow morning, I'll discuss the fourth question. Now, it's interesting that speech is considered so important. Arjuna specifically asked the question and Krishna answered the question about speech. Now there are two ways of looking at speech as a characteristic of a person. Sometimes we may say, oh, this person is a sweet talker. This person just flatters and deceives. Somebody is good at marketing. Then they say that the expert advertiser, promoter, marketer is one who can make a Eskimo believe that they need a refrigerator or air conditioner. So we may say speech can deceive, and speech is often used to deceive also. So then, if speech can be used to deceive, there are many places where speech is almost de-emphasized. So de-emphasized means that if somebody is a sweet talker, don't get carried away by their talk. Then also there is this saying, walk your talk, isn't it? That is, you can talk big things, but what you talk doesn't count much. How you live matters much more. So speech can be de-emphasized. So that it does seem that if we evaluate a person solely by their speech, then we could be misled. So this de-emphasis, the opposite of that is overemphasis. Now this overemphasis is where speech becomes the sole characteristic. That is the problem. Krishna is giving three characteristics over here. Among them, speech is the most important. Why? It is the first. See, if you look at the characteristics, that a person is not seeking material pleasures and is finding spiritual pleasure. Nobody externally can know that. How can we observe someone Okay, during the time when we are interacting with them, they can act as if they are not interested in spiritual material relations. And anybody can act as if they are having spiritual happiness. Bhakti Thakur's Guru, Gaurkishore Babaji would say, what is the price of tears during a kirtan? He said it is the price of an onion. You get an onion, keep it in your eyes, you will get tears. So, it is the price of onion. Anybody can even fake having tears of ecstasy. Those tears are not of ecstasy, but people can think it is of ecstasy. So, the point is, who is actually experiencing spiritual happiness and who is not? Who has turned away from material dualities and who has not? That is not so easy to figure out. So, to some extent, these criteria can be applied to ourselves to know how well we are going forward. At the same time, we would like to know whom we are following, whom we are taking guidance from, how spiritually evolved they are. And for that purpose, the first criteria by which we generally, at least a thoughtful person, assesses another person is by their speech. Of course, we may say we look at how a person is dressed, that person is unclean, untidy, disheveled, and that takes their credibility down a notch. But generally, if we want to assess a person, what do they speak and how do they speak? That's a very important criteria. So, speech is not given by Krishna as the sole criteria, but it is Can you hear me without this?
Yeah.
Behind? You can hear me? You cannot? Okay. Okay. Let's recite the verse till then. Dukkhesh, oh, you cannot see that, but most of you know the verse. Dukkeshvanudvigna manaha. Those of you who have your phone, you can take it out of the phone also. Sukheshu vigata spruha. Vitaraga bhaya krodha. Sthita munirujyate. So, here Krishna is describing that before we can focus on the speech is important, but what is the inner state of mind which leads to their speech? So he says the person is not delighted, dukkheshva anudvigna manaha. The person doesn't get dejected when there is stress, and the person doesn't get elated when there is happiness. Sukheshu vigata spruha. Now this does not mean that the person doesn't experience those things. If somebody is given delicious food, they will find it as delicious. If somebody is given dry food that is spoiled, they will notice that. So it is the sukha and dukkha, they result from sense perception. And if the weather is cold, even if a person is self-realized, they are going to feel it as cold. That is going to be there. That's simply a reaction of the body to that particular external environment. But they are not affected by it. They don't get emotionally oscillated by it, going up or going down. And how does this happen? Vita raga bhaya krodha. This same phrase will come again in 4.10. Krishna talks about it. Manmaya mahamapashita bahavo jnanatapasa puta madbhavamagata. There it is, 4.10a. Vita raga bhaya krodha. So, these three things can be understood in many different ways. But basically, raga bhaya krodha, these are three modes in which we may, three ways in which we may interact with the world. That raga is attachment, desire. Oh, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. Then bhaya is fear. What if I don't get it? What if now that I have got it, I lose it? And krodha is, why couldn't I get it? When I got it, Why isn't it as good as I thought it would be? Or after I got it and lost it, why did I lose it? So basically, when we interact with things in this world, there are these three broad range of emotions possible. That desire, I want it. Fear, what if I lose it? Alright. And then anger, why did I lose it? So, in one sense, the interaction, okay, let's come back, good. So, basically, if we consider our interaction with any sense object, it runs along these three lanes. The lane of desire, the lane of fear, and the lane of anger. So, these three emotions, raga, bhaya, krodha. So, these three define our interaction with this world. Now, sometimes, depending on the strength of a particular desire, correspondingly there will be that much fear, there will be that much anger. So Krishna is saying that if we are to not be affected by the ups and downs of the world, then we need to actually be aware that these are unhealthy ways of interacting with the world. Desire, fear and anger. All this comes because the world is very big for me. So I want it, and if I don't get it, it's terrible. If I lose it, it's terrible in a different way. And these three can be associated with three different worldviews. So basically, when we talk about this world, and there is some other world. So this world is real, the other world is real. This world is unreal, the other world is unreal. Like that you can have 4 quadrants. Now if you consider this world is real, the other world is unreal. Is that a familiar philosophy? That is materialism. That's the prominent philosophy in this world. It's a philosophy, it's a philosophy. Philosophy is the sophistry of fools, the word juggler. But most people think the idea of some other world, that's just some pre-scientific religious mythology. And it's all become outdated. This world is all that is real. So this is what leads to raga. If this world is real, or say one life is all that you have. Yesterday I was coming back from IIM. There's a name of a shop or a hotel, it was whatever it was. Then, or it was a brand, I don't know. It was just like a big hoarding I saw above a place. Khao, pio, aish karo. I think people want to do that, but to put it so prominently in front of a hotel or whatever it is, that is just materialism. This life is all that you have. Enjoy. As in Kolkata, I saw an ad. Enjoy before you become a dirty old man. Acknowledging that you become old. Now, what does the dirty mean? If an old person has materialistic desires for worldly objects, that is not very pleasant. So, the idea is this life is all that you have. Enjoy, enjoy. So, this is what leads to raga. Now, there is the worldview that this world is false, the other world is real. You go to the opposite. What is that worldview? Sorry? Oh, that is not okay. You can call it a spiritual worldview, but that is Mayavad, impersonalism specifically. So impersonalism holds that Brahma Satya, Jagat Mithya. This world is false. And now this significantly is not the teaching of the Bhagavad-gita. Krishna considers this world so real and so really important that he descends to this world to establish order over here, again and again, not just once. So the world is real and it is really important. It is not the most important thing, that is definitely true. So the Gita's philosophy falls over here. We could call it Bhakti philosophy. That's a devotionalism worldview. When there is an impersonal worldview, the result of that, to some extent, is that because this world is false, that's what we think, but the world appears very real. There are so many sense objects and they appear to be filled with so much pleasure. At any moment, one is just caught by that and entangled by that. So this worldview itself leads to bhaya. Bhaya of this world. That the world is filled with so much temptation, which is all deceptive, which is all treacherous. And I have to be extremely cautious to the point of being paranoid. No temptation should catch me. There is bhaya over here. Now, some amount of fear with respect to interaction with the world is necessary, but we look at it how it is deficient little later. So now there is the third worldview. That is, we'll come to Gita world. This world is false, the other world is false. This is nihilism. Prabhupada calls this voidism. It's shunyavad. And that is associated with krodha. But krodha is, why do I even exist? This world, there's nothing of value, but I exist. And what is the point of existing? There's one prominent existentialist philosopher who was nihilistic. He is John Paul Sartre. So he said that life is suffering. The more you try to relieve the suffering, the more you try to find pleasure, the more you increase your suffering. I said, this is actually Bhagavad-gita philosophy. Well, not so fast. That is only one part. What is the conclusion? Therefore, the only question worth asking is whether to commit suicide today or tomorrow. Because life is just pointless. So now there are not many people who are actually active proponents of nihilism. Buddhism is becoming increasingly popular in the West, but it is Buddhism which is almost made like a non-philosophical Buddhism, which more people are concerned with attaining some kind of Zen, peaceful state, rather than worrying about what philosophy it is teaching. In India, wherever there is some Buddhism influential, that was political Buddhism. Whereas it was adopted by Ambedkar primarily because he wanted to make a statement against Hinduism and its caste system. So after he adopted his Buddhism, it was a political rule device for him. And he wrote what he believes in Buddhism. He says, I don't believe in karma, I don't believe in reincarnation. Then, like there's Dalai Lama, under Dalai Lama there are Panchen Lamas. There's a Panchen Lama of India who wrote back. And he says, what Ambedkar has adopted is not Buddhism, it is Ambedkarism. It has got nothing to do with Buddhism. Because he rejected the core tenets of Buddhism. So, it was a political move for him, not a spiritual move. This is not to criticize Ambedkar, it is just to point out that most people, even when they adopt Buddhism, they don't know its philosophical implications. The point is, at a philosophical level, it is nihilistic. And it is not a way a person can live if they really take the implications of nihilism seriously. If this world is not real, the other world is also not real. What is even the point of living at all? And many young people in the West, they may not be philosophical nihilistic, but that's how they've grown up. Nothing really matters in life. Everything else is wordplay, power struggle, and there's nothing of meaning. It's a very dark. It's among all these worldviews, I would consider nihilism actually is darker than materialism. Because even if somebody is materialistic, at least they will try to do material things well. And they will try to maintain order in the world. They will try to bring about some material progress. It is not complete by any means, but it is better. So we could say in terms of, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. So Krishna is telling, when we want to become steady amid life's ups and downs, it is not just a matter of somehow using our willpower. Although this thing is triggering me with desire, I will not succumb to it. It is not gritting our teeth and clenching our fists and holding our desires and emotions inside us. No. That may be required intermittently as an act of discipline. But there has to be a fundamental change of worldview. Without a change of worldview, the external cannot be sustained. So when Krishna is saying Dukkeshu Anudvignamana Sukheshu Vigata Spruha, that is possible when there is an underlying shift of worldview. So that shift of worldview will be reflected in one's speech. And that, how it is reflected in the speech, that's described in the next verse. So, Yah sarvatra nabhisnehas tattat prapya shubha shubham nabhinandati nadveshti tasya prajna pratisthita. So, na abhinandati. One doesn't praise something too much. Oh, this is so wonderful, this is so wonderful. Na dveshti. Oh, this is terrible. Life is terrible, everything is terrible. There is no extreme expression in one word as one's words. So the speech basically is measured. It is regulated. And that is a characteristic of a spiritually evolved person. Now that does not mean that a spiritual evolved person will never praise anything nor never criticize anything. It is that at this particular point, Krishna is talking about primarily karma yoga. He's not really talking about bhakti yoga here. Although many of these characteristics can be applied to bhakti yogis also. So from a karma yoga perspective, there is not much knowledge of the spiritual reality. So because there is not much knowledge of Krishna as the ultimate spiritual reality, so there is no seeing of Krishna's hand in the world. And one can praise things in the world if one can see them in connection with Krishna. And if something is pratikul for our Krishna bhakti, one can criticize that. Hey, then this is not the way things are to be done. But from a material perspective, from the perspective of my pleasure, the criticism and the praise don't come up. So there is equanimity in speech. So it's not a particular kind of speaking, not a particular kind of language, not a particular tone necessarily. It is more the steadiness in the content of the speech. So this is what indicates that a person is self-realized. So when this is the first characteristic, what it means is, most of us, we will evaluate people by their speech. If their speech seems interesting, then we want to know more about that person. So that's how the spiritual journey starts. The saints are known by hearing, not by seeing. That doesn't mean we don't see them. We hear from them and then we see their actions also. But here, in terms of hearing, the point is that their speech is steady. And nowadays, we conclude with one point, we can have questions, that nowadays, while Krishna is talking about speech from a spiritual perspective, from the perspective of one who is spiritually evolved, nowadays there is a lot of research happening about the psychological impact of speech. Basically, when you talk about speech, there is what we consider speech is outer speech, what we speak to others. But there is also inner speech. There is the self-talk that is going on inside us. And the kind of speech that a person habitually words externally and the kind of speech that goes on inside their mind, that actually both of these affect the emotional well-being. So if a person is habitually talking negative, oh, this person is bad, that person is bad, that person is bad, and their just not just speaking like that, they're also thinking like that. Internally, their own emotional health will become damaged by that. They will be feeding toxic inputs into their emotions. That's why there's a lot of talk about affirmations now. Have affirmative speech. Now, affirmations don't mean that whatever we believe or whatever we speak will become a reality. That's an oversimplification of the idea of affirmation. If somebody is 4.5 feet tall and they make an affirmation, I'm 7 feet tall, I'm 7 feet tall, I'm 7 feet tall. They can do a japa of 16 rounds if I'm 7 feet tall. They're not going to become 7 feet. So affirmations are not so much about manifestation. They are more about recollection. And there are certain truths which we all know are true, but we tend to forget. So, for example, if you remind us, Krishna is in control. Krishna controls everything. Even when bad things are happening, even when things are out of my control, it's still in Krishna's control. So, whatever happens, I, the soul, am indestructible. These are truths that we know, but we tend to forget. So, ultimately, things happen for a good purpose. Right now, bad things may be happening, but things happen for a good purpose. So that way, affirmations can be very helpful. And more important is, when we start becoming devotees, we are chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra repeatedly. That's necessary as sadhana. But our speech needs to also become steady. Not expressing too much desire for worldly things, not expressing too much aversion, the lack of worldly things. And internally also, when something bad has happened, if there is a constant voice going on, oh, this is so terrible, life is once fair, why is all this happening to me, why is Krishna doing this, where is Krishna, does Krishna even exist? Now, sometimes that kind of question coming is fine. We can't control that. But if we let that play as the inner voice, then that will adversely affect not just our spirituality, but also our emotional state, emotional health also. So, this speech is something which we can choose to regulate externally. And the more we regulate externally, the more we'll find that our emotions also will internally become regulated. And that's how this, when it says the first characteristic, said, I was having this pendulum over here. So in between, it's like speech as the starting characteristic. Starting characteristics means when we are looking for a seer in other people, we observe, we evaluate. And in us also, if we are seekers, we cultivate. Let me try to moderate my speech. Let me try to make my speech steady. So the word moderate, when we say moderate our speech, it has two meanings. First is, it's like I evaluate, I observe. Like somebody is a moderator. They evaluate and then after that they regulate. So if we are not moderating our speech, we cannot make our speech moderate. So we want to make our speech moderate. And when that happens, that will be a significant step forward in our spiritual journey. It will help us to steady our emotions. So even when inside the voice sings, this is terrible, this is the end of the world. In English, there are new words which keep coming. In fact, there's a website where you can submit a new word if you like. And if enough people upvote it, into the democracy, that word will be included. But so there's a word that has become quite popular. I think last year it was one of the words of 2023. It's called hyperventilate. Hyperventilate means what? To just, every small thing. If this happens, oh, I love this is the best thing in the world. Some bad thing, I hate it, this is the end of the world. Because people tend to hyperventilate. So that kind of hyperventilation, we can avoid it. So even if our mind starts hyperventilating, this is difficult, but I have survived tough things in life. Krishna is still in charge. Krishna will guide me. So we can try to externally moderate our speech. And that way, we will be able to moderate our emotions also. So in one sense, this point I was making is emotions and words. They are related. It's like emotions can lead to the word that we speak, but the words that we speak can also, they can change the emotions that we have. So this can both go downwards when they are unregulated. Unregulated emotions can cause unregulated speech, but both can go upwards. If we regulate our words, we can regulate our emotions. If we can regulate our emotions, we can regulate our words. It can work both ways. So I'll summarize what we discussed today. I discussed 5 main points. I started first with the Gita structure. How in the first summary of the Gita, this is the concluding section, 254 to 72. This is a very oft-quoted section. And in this is the first description of the characteristics of saintly, of spiritual seers, characteristics are there. Then in that connection, I discussed how the Gita uses non-literal language. It is after all a kavya, and kavya means non-literal language is quite common. So we discussed the 4 questions. The first question, bhasha, is what does it refer to? Characteristics. And that is primarily answered in 265. The question itself 264. Then the next is prabhasheta, that is speech. And that is answered in the next 2 verses, 66, 67. So we discussed, sorry, not 66, it's all, sorry. 54, 55, 56, 57. So then after that, asit is regulation of senses. And then there is rajet. Rajet is engagement of senses. And that will be answered from 62 to 74. Depending on 64 to 72. Sorry. So we'll discuss that tomorrow. Then we discussed about when we are talking about speech. So we discussed first actually the bhashet, 55. The characteristic of spiritually evolved person is that the world becomes small, the God becomes big. And when that happens, that's when the person can be materially peaceful and spiritually joyful. So both need to go together, and that's when it is possible. And then I discussed about, with this to 56th verse, I discussed about the 4 worldviews. Vita, Raga, Bhaya, Krodha. So there is materialism, impersonalism, nihilism, and then there is Gita's world, Bhakti worldview. So to change our speech and our emotions, that is not just willpower. I will not speak in this way. Increasing willpower alone, what we need to do is the worldview needs to be changed. It is a fundamental change of worldview that leads to this difference in how we function. And then lastly, we discussed about speech itself. Speech is not to be devalued or de-emphasized, nor is it to be overvalued. So speech devalued means it has no importance at all, and overvalued, sole importance. It is, somebody speaks nicely, they must be a great person. No. But in between is, it is the starting characteristic. We look at the speech and then we look at the rest of the life also. And with respect to a person being able to moderate their speech, what happens is that to be able to moderate the speech, it is not that they don't praise anything. If something connected with Krishna, they may praise it. But overall, the point is speech and emotions. We discussed that our emotions can affect our speech and our speech can affect our emotions. So ideally speaking, both of them, we want to make them more and more moderate. And that's how we grow spiritually. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions? Yes, please. Okay, a lot of questions. You can try to please ask.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna Guru. So I have a question about, you said that we need to be materially peaceful and spiritually joyful. So I wanted to understand what is your point of view with respect to Kunti Maharaja's prayers. She prayed to Krishna that you give me more and more material blessings so that I can remember you. Why is she asking for material disturbances?
Yes, it's a good question. A good question is a good way of saying I don't have a good answer. I'll try to answer. Great devotees in particular situations may experience or express certain emotions that are more expressive of their particular condition, their particular state of consciousness, rather than a universal spiritual characteristic. See, if you consider Kunti's prayer over there, विपदः सन्तुतः शाश्वत तत्र जगद्गुरो भवतो अदर्शनं यत् स्यात् पुनर्भवदर्शनं भवतो दर्शनं यत् स्यात्. So we can look at it at a contextual level and at a universal level. At a contextual level, she is fearing separation from Krishna. Krishna is about to depart. So the prayer is primarily a longing for Krishna. That Krishna, whenever there has been danger, you have never abandoned us, you have been there with us. And we value your company so much, value your presence so much, that if it is danger that brings you to us, then we want danger also. So it is not so much an invitation of danger as it is a longing for the presence of Krishna. So that is the primary focus. And now at a universal level, now we could say that distress can be an impetus for taking shelter of Krishna. And there is some truth to that. At the same time, it is not that when we are in distress, there are two possibilities. In distress, we may take shelter of something else. Yeah, there's so many other things we can take shelter of. And it's also possible that we can take a shelter without distress also, isn't it? So just because A leads to B, or A is the cause of B, does not mean A is the only cause of B, and doesn't mean that A will only cause B. They're two different things. It's a logic that A leads to B, but doesn't mean that A will lead only to B, and only A will lead to B. So in that particular situation, there's a difference that sometimes when a devotee is in distress, that can impel a devotee to take shelter of Krishna. But is that a standard prayer that devotees offer to Krishna? Please increase the distress in my life. Well, no. If we see, I was in one place and there's this devotee, a young devotee, very enthusiastic. He's preaching very nicely, and when he was preaching, it was very sweet. And once people would become devotees, just chastise them publicly like anything. And it's almost like, when he was preaching, he was one person, when he started cultivating, he was a different person. So the people over there were bewildered. And then I visited that place, Gautam came to talk with me, and then I asked him, confronted him, he said, Prabhu, I don't like to do this, but it's my service. I said, what is your service? He said that, if I don't chastise people, how will they become humble? And they have to become humble. I said, Prabhu, But if you chastise people, what you are creating in them is not humility, it is humiliation. And now, can humiliation lead to humility? Sometimes, rarely. But again, the difference between humility and humiliation is like the same as the difference between fasting and starving with respect to the ego. But see, our culture, this world is dukkhalaya, so let's make each other dukkhi. Now, yes, all of you sitting here, while you're sitting instead of attending the class, let's start slapping each other. Everybody will realize this world is dukkhalaya. They won't realize it. They will realize this temple is dukkhalaya. I don't want to come here. Isn't it? So it's amanina manadena. We want to cultivate humility for ourselves, but we are told to offer respect to others. That means help others to feel accepted, valued, welcomed, and that's how we will grow as a community. Yes, there is dukkha in the world, but we don't want to consciously increase the dukkha. Sometimes we may hear some story of some devotee got cancer and they become very serious in their bhakti. One devotee asked, oh, I am not good about not doing my japa nicely. Should I pray that I get cancer so that I will chant nicely? There are so many people in this world who get cancer. How many people actually become devotees because of that? So, Mahaprabhu and Sanatana Goswami, if by giving up my body I could get bhakti, then I would have given up my body 1,000 times till now. So it's not that simple. So at a universal level, it's not the principle that distress will lead to devotion. It's like, if the price of getting the association of Krishna is that we are in distress, then we are ready to accept that. That is the mood over there. But in general, a devotee does not create trouble for themselves. A devotee does not invite trouble. Yes, there's enough trouble in the world, and of course we can say that when we take responsibility for Krishna, then that itself will cause anxiety. So we don't have to specifically pray to Krishna, give me adversity. In the material world, if we take some responsibility for preaching, for maintaining a temple, for building a temple, for doing a seva, that itself will bring some problems, many problems in our life. But those are actually what will bring us closer to Krishna. So, when can material distress bring us closer to Krishna? When can material happiness bring us closer to Krishna? When can both of them take us away from Krishna? And if we start thinking too much about that, we'll stop thinking about Krishna. Isn't it? So don't worry too much. Try to make our life as materially peaceful as possible, and so that we can focus on spiritual growth. If distress comes, tolerate it. If happiness comes, gratefully accept it. Krishna, you give this to me so that I can better serve you. And that's how we move forward in our life. Okay? Thank you. Yes, please, where's the mic?
My question is with regard to the speech. So, today...
I think your mic is not working.
Yeah. So my question is with regard to the speech part of it. So today, two words which are generally used to describe people is, one is to be an introvert and another is to be an extrovert. And in our devotee community itself, with our imperfect, mundane senses, we may judge people accordingly. This Prabhuji is not speaking too much, or this Prabhuji is very, outspoken, something like that. So, but we may judge someone on that level, whereas that person may actually be quite realized. And in the way that you emphasized today about, not overemphasizing or de-emphasizing speech, and about the stability of the speech, right? So, as a listener, how does one avoid, doing an offense or judging someone like that?
See, it's not an offense to observe certain characteristics of devotees, even if they are characteristics of pure devotees. When Prabhupada was in India, there's one a Hindu Mahasabha leader. He said, Swamiji, you pronounce Sanskrit words in a very Bengali way. Prabhupada said, I'm a Bengali. So the other day, Prabhupada said, what can I do? I have a Bengali body. There's a slight difference, but that's a fact. So we don't have to force ourselves to not see that. The problem is only if we reduce a devotee to that. So like say this devotee is an American devotee, this devotee is an Indian devotee. Okay, somebody can be American, they can be spiritually realized, somebody can be an Indian, be spiritually realized. When we reduce a devotee to their body characteristics, Narash Gurushu Naramatir, that when we consider the Guru to be an ordinary human being, now that does not mean that we can't consider the Guru has some characteristics, some aspects of their physical or psychophysical or psychological side may reflect particular aspects. That's perfectly fine. So observing some devotees may be extroverts, some devotees may be introverts, and that's fine. No problem with that. Okay.
You mentioned about seeing world big and seeing Krishna big. So how do we go from one state to the other state, from seeing world big to seeing Krishna big? And also, even if there is a fundamental change in fundamental worldview, still material desires may be very strong. If that is the case, how do we deal with that?
Yeah. So, regarding the second question on material desires, we'll discuss tomorrow and day after, because that's where sensory regulations and sensory engagement comes up. Now, specifically, this is a journey that whatever we bring into our consciousnness again and again and again, that starts becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. That's how ads work. Show the same thing again and again and again and again. Oh, as I see the same ad again and again and again, this time I want to buy this thing, I'll buy it from this product. So repetition plays a very significant role, especially during our sadhana time. What are we doing? That is the time when we're consciously focusing on Krishna, cutting off from everything else. That's the time we may chant 16 rounds, we may chant, we may do this puja, that we may sing this song, but at least for a few minutes during the time of our sadhana, we need to actually experience that there is a bigger reality, that Krishna is bigger. And how do we experience that? Actually, we start experiencing some peace, we start experiencing some strength, some solidity, some shelter. So, when we give exclusive time to Krishna, then Krishna starts becoming bigger and bigger and bigger in our consciousness. So, it is practice, but at the same time, it's also purification. We need to practice at our level. What Krishna did is abhyas and vairagya. So abhyas is the practice. So we expose ourselves to Krishna more and more and more. Vairagya is with respect to the world. We don't expose ourselves to the world so much. We can't function in the world with closed eyes, but especially those things which tend to occupy our mind. It could be sense objects, it could be politics, it could be sports, it could be stock market. Now we may have to regulate our exposure to that. So by abhyas and vairagya, what we want to make it big in our consciousness, abhyas for that. What we want to make it small in our consciousness, vairagya. That's how it will happen. We'll discuss this more tomorrow. Okay, one last question. Okay, there are 2 questions. Okay, lot of questions. Okay, these 3 questions will stop.
Hare Krishna. Pradeep, thank you so much for the wonderful class. When we get chastised, and that comes through speech, words, the first thing that our emotions also get there, and that actually translates into speech in a way. Now, how do we draw a line at that particular moment?
Yeah, it's a natural reaction at that time, out of self-defense or whatever, retaliation or whatever. So, to some extent, sattva guna, we cannot always be sattva guna, but if we have cultivated sattva guna, at least say in the morning time, we try to have a sattvic environment around us, and we try to make the major decisions in our life in sattva guna. We have to do practical things in rajoguna, tamoguna, whatever it is, whatever mode we are in, we have to function in life. But the major decisions if we keep as a program, then what will happen is, maybe at that time somebody speaks harshly to us and we speak back at them. But then afterwards we can learn from that experience. And then maybe, okay, this person has this kind of nature. They may speak harshly to me. What should I do at that time? So when we are in Sattva-guna, we can try to make that planning. Sometimes life may just ambush us with certain things and we can just make the best of what we can at that time. But if we can plan it in advance, okay, maybe this happens at that time, I'll just walk away from this, or I'll just be humble, or I'll not raise my voice but I'll speak back formally to the person, or I'll write an email, or I'll ask someone to act as mediator. We have to find out some way to deal with it. See, anger is an emotion. Now, if we express anger, then others burn. If we repress anger, then we burn. So, we want to avoid both these things. What we need to do in between is process the anger. Process the anger means, maybe, when this person did something, generally I find it, I take aim, It's like, if somebody has spoken something which has hurt us terribly, it's caused a lot of problem. So, instead of telling, you are such a harsh person, you are so rude, you are not a Vaishnava at all. Worst is, you don't know you committed a Vaishnava aparad to me. That's not very helpful. So, one of the ways I find best way to deal with it is, describe the action, describe the impact. That when you use these words, I felt rejected, I felt violated, I felt worthless. I felt as if you don't care for me at all. You don't understand me at all. I felt as if we have no relationship at all. So talk about the action, talk about the impact. None of this is there a label affixed to the other person. You are so rude, you are so insensitive. And then third is method. Method means that, if this is a situation, if you could have done this, or if you could have called me privately and explained the situation and told me something, it would have been so much, I would not have felt so bad. Now, sometimes people will listen, sometimes people will not. But at least if we do this, we will be able to diffuse many of the future conflicts that may arise. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. That's the mic, yeah.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Thank you so much for the nice class and extending yourself for next 3 sessions. You were
I thought you were going to say extending this to 3 sessions. Okay.
Prabhuji, you were saying that we should process the anger. The question, I was going to ask this question. How important is prayers, when we do this? Because let's say we do mistake multiple times. So at that moment, because it happened, like you said, you are ambushed.
Say Mam Anusmara Yuddhacha. There's an inner work and there is outer work. So praying is like inner work. But then that does not replace the outer work. So we have to be praying. At the same time, we have to deal with the situation. So sometimes if we have a conditioning, and that conditioning is going to make us act in particular ways. Now, we cannot overnight expect the conditioning to go away. So if somebody is short-tempered, that doesn't mean they can't be a devotee. They can still be a devotee, but if they are told, you cannot speak like this to other devotees, or you should not, they also resolve, I won't speak like this, shouldn't speak like this, but they keep doing that again. Then maybe they will talk about boundaries in the next session, or sensory regulation, but maybe they need to adjust their way. If somebody tends to get very angry and speak harshly, then maybe they should not be in devotee care. They can be some other service. If somebody just can't restrain their tongue, they just eat a lot of food. Well, they can still be devotee, but maybe they should not be in charge of Mahaprasad. Isn't it? So sometimes we need external help to help ourselves. So if it is happening again and again, we can pray to Krishna, but if the answer is not coming the way we expected, don't get discouraged. It just means that conditioning is deep, it will take some time to recover. And during that time, we need to help ourselves in some external ways by having some boundaries. I'll talk more about boundaries tomorrow. Okay. Thank you. Okay, we have 2 questions. Can we discuss tomorrow? Last question we have over here. Oh, evening also we have. Yes, this last question we finish.
The question is connected to topic, but little off. Actually,
That is a Chinta Veda Ved. Okay.
Prabhuji, when somebody is speaking to us, specifically if giving us feedback or rectifying or an improvement plan, so personally I see myself that it works as if it's not, I don't see what he is speaking objectively. It's more important who is speaking that. So, like I have a couple of seniors whom when they speak the same thing, then I can accept it. But when someone else speaks, then the anger why he is speaking. And I have also seen that those seniors speak to my equals that if you have any issue with him, you let me know, you don't speak to him directly.
Yeah.
So when I came to know this, like it's good for me, but a person who is spiritually advancing or wants to advance should actually, ideally, he should learn from everyone. He should accept. So how do we transition from that place where we cannot hear the feedback and good things from everyone, only from specific. It's more important for us who is speaking than objectively thinking it is good for me. So how do we come?
See, it's quite a good introspective question, and I would say that in the philosophy of speech itself, this is discussed. When we use words, for example, specifically words, our words merely conveyors of information. Like our words, like a pipe. Say, I am speaking something, there's like an invisible pipe or tube, through which are they the conveyors of meaning, or are they the shapers of meaning? That means, when words are spoken, are the words themselves containing the meaning, or the words like a passageway to give meaning? So both aspects are there. So what happens is, it is natural in our speech, that in our interaction with others, that if we trust the other person has earned our trust, then what they speak, that will not trigger our defensive, or fight or flight kind of response, defensive aggressive response. If that's not a person whom we trust, then it will trigger that response. So we can't change basic human psychology and biology. So somebody I don't know raises their hand near me, and then I find they wanted to pat me on my back. But how am I to know that? They raise my hand and I'll wince. Maybe I'll just shrink backward. I'll move away. And so we can't know. So that's why when we are encountering people, I don't think we should expect too much from people, ourselves also. Over-expecting from ourselves will burden us. So if we can expect feedback at least from our seniors, that is good. And if we can't accept from them also, it's going to be really difficult. But as we move ahead in our lives, we will also become more and more secure internally as we grow spiritually. And that's when people speak, so it's like, I am here, and even my behavior, my words, my conduct, it's here. So somebody is analyzing it, they're not attacking me. To get that sense, we need to be able to distance ourselves from it. And that takes some spiritual growth. I'm an author, so many devotees send their writings to me to review. So one of the things I try to make sure is, do you really want a review or just do you want an appreciation? Isn't it? You know? And sometimes, now they may not say that, but some devotees just need encouragement. Yeah, keep writing. Now, if it is to be published in a particular magazine, say in the Bhagavad-gita, I'm one of the review editors for that, then we have particular standards. So initially when somebody is starting to write, they are quite invested in the writing. And any feedback of the writing can be very discouraging. So it depends. To the extent we are able to separate ourselves from that particular issue, to the extent we can be objective. Otherwise we will be subjective. Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavad-gita ki Shri Prabhupada ki Gaur Bhakta Gaur Premanand.
Jai Krishna. So the session will continue today. 7 p.m.